Hello and welcome to Sin City itself. Las Vegas, Nevada, the setting for Tyson Fury's third and surely final fight with Deontay Wilder. My name is Martin Domin, editor of Mirror Fighting. I am joined by Chris McKenna, Daily Star's boxing correspondent, and by John Dennen of Boxing News. We're going to preview tonight's fight. First of all, Chris, I want to take you back to the summer. We looked set for Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury in Saudi Arabia. And then a certain someone broke the news that that fight likely wasn't going to happen. Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, back on. Was there a sense of disappointment that we're not actually going to see the undisputed fight?
Yeah, I think there's always a disappointment because you want that one champion in any division. So an all-British fight at heavyweight, it was going to be absolutely massive. The only kind of, I suppose, benefit of it not happening was I felt it shouldn't have been going to Saudi Arabia and that would have taken away from it. But now what's happened is Anthony Joshua has lost and he faces a tough rematch against Usyk, so it might be gone forever. Obviously Tyson Fury or the winner of the Wilder fight can go on to be undisputed, but it's unlikely now it's going to be an all-British fight, and I think that's, it's a massive disappointment. I mean, in our lifetimes, in a lot of all the people's lifetime, you wouldn't have thought you would have the undisputed fight between two Brits at heavyweight, so we've missed out on it. It's a huge blow.
It certainly is, but let's try and stay positive, John. But let's first of all go back 20 months. February 2020, Tyson Fury in the rematch. He changed trainers, he changed tactics, he changed the result. 7th round stoppage, the towel came in. He promised that's what he would do. Nobody really believed him. How impressed were you with him back then?
Very, yeah, exactly as you say. He did exactly what he said he was going to do, and yet, to me at least, it was a complete surprise because he boxed so well in the first fight and was unlucky to have ended up with a draw by moving. Before the second one, when he was saying he was going to go forward, take it to him, knock him out, I was just thinking, well, this has got to be a bluff. And then he goes and does it, and I guess only Tyson Fury can surprise you by doing exactly what he says he's going to do, and it makes me wonder what's going to happen tonight. I mean, I guess he should repeat what worked so well for him, but he's an unpredictable man. He's an unpredictable boxer. He's hard to read, and I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Before we come to tonight, of course in boxing, very rarely does a fighter come out and say, I was beaten by the better man, I had an off night. Deontay Wilder, we could be here all day going through the excuses. Injury, weight of his costume, Tyson Fury cheated, his trainer spiked his water, probably the most ridiculous one. What did you make of all that? Not in terms, of course, I'm not asking you, do you believe any of them, but in terms of the fact that he has kept coming out with so many excuses.
I think it's worrying for him if you want him to win this fight, because he hasn't maybe got to grips with the fact that he was just well beaten. And to really improve and to respond, I think you have to accept it, look what went wrong and improve on it. But if he's just believing that he only lost that fight for all those reasons, then has he going to improve enough? Has he going to change enough in what he does to be able to beat Tyson Fury? And that's where I think having those excuses is not good for him mentally, because I don't think he will have fully looked at the second fight and gone, right, that was all wrong, I need to do something totally different. Instead he's looking at it going, well, he only was able to do that because of this and this and this. And he said it even at yesterday's weigh-in. He said it that it was on the promo video, where he goes, yeah, if Fury had felt like I did in the second fight, I'd have knocked him out. But why are we feeling bad? Because it wasn't a spiked drink. So yeah, I think it's worrying for him.
Do you think if he genuinely believes these sort of fantastical things, but if he's genuinely convinced himself of it, is there any chance that in a way that he doesn't even know he's been beaten and therefore he's dangerous?
Yeah, I suppose his confidence isn't maybe knocked, whereas anybody takes such a beating, you would be like, how am I going to do it? But I still fear that he's not fully accepted it, and I think that'll be a problem. But it is a good point. I think the confidence thing, that he still believes he can beat him. But the other thing from the first fight is he's caught Fury with his best punches, and he somehow got up, and I think that psychologically is a problem as well.
And that was the Tyson Fury who'd had 2 warm-up fights after almost 3 years out, ballooned, etc., etc. So a better Tyson Fury, of course, tonight. But Wilder has made changes. Mark Breland, that's the one, sorry, out. He was the snake in the grass. Jade Diaz, his long-time coach, still there but very much in the shadows. Malik Scott, a former opponent, of course, of Wilder, back in. If I was being cynical, I'd say Malik Scott, who was around in the camp before, maybe another yes man, maybe someone is he really going to tell Deontay Wilder what he needs to hear?
And is it really a change if he's been around the camp for so long and is so familiar? And I was just thinking today, when have you ever had a trainer of a fighter where the fighter has knocked his trainer out in a round with like half a punch that kind of grazed him?
And it's rare as well, he's sparred with Fury in the past, so it was very rare for the trainer to have been in the ring with the opponent as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that may be a help,
But when the going gets tough, and Malik Scott is telling Wilder what to do, is Wilder really going to respect him enough to follow those instructions and do something different, which he has to do, or revert to the familiar Deontay Wilder that we all know? And that's, Malik Scott, well, he must know his stuff, but he's not exactly a proven trainer, is he? And this is the world heavyweight title we're talking about. It's kind of an acid test for your first big gig as a trainer.
I mean, if you're being cynical, you say Deontay Wilder fought very hard to get this third fight, as he was partly entitled to do so. He's going to make millions of pounds. If he loses, he's not in a terrible situation, is he? Whereas if he didn't have this fight, it was always difficult to see where he would go. So if he's just cashing out, could you blame him?
No, I mean, because it's a lot of money. I mean, they've suggested on their side that they would have taken a big step aside offer for the Joshua fight. That was never made from Matchroom's side, from Top Rank or Frank Warren's side. So you get the sense he wanted the fight still, but if they were going to accept step-side money, psychologically again, that's not the right kind of attitude to have, I think. So cashing out, look, if he gets big, he's still going to be a big name, he's still going to be a big draw, and I think people will look at him, he's a dangerous puncher, but he's going to bring a lot to the table. So if another heavyweight wants to come up and prove themselves, he would be good for that. But look, I suppose we talk about the fight in more detail, but he's still a very, 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 very live fighter, so anything can happen.
Yeah, and there must be easier ways of cashing out and fighting a 6'9", clearly angry Tyson Fury who's chewed you up the time before. I mean, whatever happens, Wilder Joshua, the whole world is still going to watch that fight, even if it's a non-title 8-rounder.
We can but hope. Talking about Tyson Fury, last time, of course, he had a few weeks just with Sugar Hill Stewart, changed the tactics. As we said, this time he's had a year and a half, but it's been interrupted. We had COVID. Tyson himself has COVID twice, he says. But I do feel like there's been a lot of talk about him not having a proper training camp. But he does seem to have trained, if not all the way through, more or less whenever he can. Whether that was at home, Miami, he was here in Vegas. Do we think there's anything in the lack of intensity, perhaps, of the training camp?
Maybe something, but coming out later is always a bit of a worry because for the LA fight, I think, and for the Vegas fight, he always was out here a longer time. But 3 weeks is probably enough to acclimatise. I think Ricky Hatton used to come out 2 weeks in advance, so sometimes I think it's enough. But intensity, my only worry for him is that because the second fight was so one-sided, that there might be that bit in his head where he's thinking, this guy ain't good enough for me, I'm levels above him, so I'll just be able to do it again. And has that taken a little edge out of him in the training camp, possibly?
And historically, he has sort of, taken some fighters lightly. He has been sort of caught by fighters, but beneath him. I know this was like years ago, but there's still that sort of potential element of his character of just making harder work of a fight that should be easy work. And I suppose the Otto Wallin fight wasn't that long ago.
Until maybe yesterday's weigh-in, Tyson Fury seemed in a very jovial mood. We can't possibly repeat what he said on here yesterday. But overall this week, you've both been here. He has seemed in a good mood, as I say. He's quite jovial. Doesn't necessarily feel like a man who's under any pressure.
No, he's like he's here on holiday half the time. But I found that the weigh-in was a bit more intense from him. It was very kind of aggressive, a lot of shouting, and maybe that is to try and unnerve Wilder, that like thinking that you're dealing with this madman, like, because he was acting crazy, like he was just running around shouting. His brother was there shouting, and they were shouting at everybody, not just Wilder, his family, his partner, and everything. So it must be some sort of idea, because everything kind of Tyson does, I think there's always kind of a method to it. So maybe he thinks he wants to really unnerve Wilder. I don't know how much more unnerved he can be, considering what happened in the last fight, but it certainly seemed a tactic to do it. He seemed intent to come out and spend every second of the time on stage just shouting down. Even when he was on the scales, he was giving a one-finger salute and all of that, so it seemed very much intentional.
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting that at the weigh-in today, because, you know, like the press conference and in the days before, Fury seemed pretty calm and composed to me, and then at the weigh-in, he suddenly seemed, he gave the impression of being agitated and wound up, and, you know, I thought he was intimidating, and maybe that was the point, and maybe he was just letting that side of him out as well. And again, maybe that is to throw Wilder off, or maybe he is rattled. I don't think he is. I don't think Wilder's really. Wilder has tried not to engage much this week, and I'm not sure he's done that much to wind up Fury, other than with these sort of far out excuses. But then he's been saying that for so long that I find it hard to think that Tyson Fury's really taken it to heart.
I think sometimes with someone like Tyson Fury, you are best just not to try and beat him at these sorts of games, because it's just not. How can you? When he just comes out with the stuff he does, just take it and say, "Okay, Tyson." You know.
It's what he says and how he shouts down as well. He just seems to be able to shout anybody down and they're out. So.
Specifically with the weights, Tyson Fury £277 compared to £273 last time, but he did weigh in fully dressed. Deontay Wilder £238 compared to £221 last time. Now, people were surprised perhaps that he was heavy for the rematch, or heavier. He's now put on another stone plus. He says he just let it happen. You know, they trained, he got heavy, such is life. We've all been there. But do we think is it that? Is it that he just started camp heavy, kept heavy, or is it some sort of plan in his head that that's going to give him an advantage?
I think it's definitely planned, because it's not like it's fat. His muscle he's put on, he's huge and solid, so it's obviously part of their plan to be bigger. He said at the weigh-in, he said that he doesn't want to be rushed, I think was the word he used. So he's obviously thinking, if I'm bigger, Fury won't be able to just push me around like he did the last time, but he's going to be slower, and he's going to be harder for him to get out of the way of Fury's shots. So it doesn't look like a great idea from the offset, but before the last fight we were saying Fury would be mad to go chasing this guy, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a sign that, yeah, like you say, he doesn't want to push back this time, so he's going to try and meet him head on and fight him for the centre of the ring. So I'm kind of thinking we're going to get a bit of a tear up for as long as it lasts, but if he does that, he's going to be kind of where Fury wants him as well.
Because I thought before the weigh-in, I was thinking this one might go the distance, because obviously Wilder won't be pulled out, Fury will be on top, but maybe there'll be a few more scary moments this time, and it might go on and that. But now, after seeing the weigh-in, the size of both of them, as John said, I think they're just going to meet head on, and it's just going to be chaos for as long as it lasts.
And it is worth saying that, you know, what Breland got the sack, and he was the one person who did the right thing. Like, throwing in the towel was clearly the right decision. So he's fired someone for his camp who was, you know, not going to do necessarily what Wilder wanted, but was going to do the right thing. I think that's a big mistake, getting rid of someone like that. You might not like the fact that you've been stopped, but you're shooting the messenger and not dealing with the problem.
Yeah, and the fact that as well, I don't like that Malik Scott has said it and Wilder said it, that no towel will come in. I don't think that's the right attitude you should have. If he's in trouble, the towel should come in. I mean, hopefully the referee it makes the right call if it gets to that point. So somebody's going to have to look after him if it goes like it did the last time.
Because that's part of the trainer's job. A boxer is a warrior, and is going to fight to the end, and that's why you have trainer to save them from themselves sometimes. And it also means, you know, the trainer can't always just follow the orders from his boxer. He's got to tell him and make him do what he doesn't want to do sometimes, and that includes the tactics and the way that Wilder's got to approach the fight. So again, I think that's a bad sign.
I mean, I know any punch, especially at heavyweight, can end the fight, but it does feel like if Fury wins by stoppage, it is that accumulation, isn't it? It's that either the referee, as you say, steps in. Well, that might be the only way if the corner doesn't. It is unlikely, you'd think, that Fury just lands one shot and then Wilder's face down and out.
Well, he's never really done it, has he? So even the last one, it was the cumulative effect. He put him down a couple of times, but they were good shots. But he wasn't out. He wasn't struggling to beat the count. He was just kind of. It was more the power of the shot took him off balance and put him down, rather than the knockdowns that Fury had in the first fight, where he was seriously hurt. So yeah, if Fury wins by stoppage, it's a similar, and the referee's going to probably step in rather than Wilder being counted out.
Is there any risk that Wilder gasses out with this extra weight if the fight goes maybe beyond the 6-7 rounds?
I guess there's a risk. I mean, there have been fights where Wilder's kind of struggled, hasn't he? But got himself out of trouble with his power, and he doesn't seem to lose his power later on. And as we know, he's going to have to rely on that massive punch. So it's a risk, but I think he'll carry his power late, and you know he's going to have to be trying to use that puncher's chance from round 1 to round 12. So I'm not sure he'll gas out as such.
20 months out for both men. Fury, though, is used to it. He's come back from longer absences than death. I don't imagine that will worry him. Wilder was more active. Anything in that might play a part?
Possibly, yeah. As you say, Fury's. I think was it like 5 fights in 5 years or more. It's something ridiculous like that he's had. So he's well used to it. We've never really seen Wilder inactive for a long time. It can never be a good thing. But I suppose the only thing is they're both coming from the same position. If Fury had a fight 3 months ago and Wilder hadn't fought in 20 months, then I think it'd be a big difference. But the both coming in, I'm sure whatever way they planned the camp, they did it in more sparring to ensure that ring rust has gone from it.
And also, just like you say, Wilder's been the sort of more active fighter in his career, but particularly after the way the second fight went, he probably needed more time to physically get over it, and to emotionally, maybe he hasn't emotionally gotten over it, but at least he's had time to indulge in this far out positive self-talk, that maybe this has given him time to convince himself or persuade himself that the defeat to Fury wasn't as bad as it actually was. So I think the time out probably won't do Wilder a disservice.
Switching from the ring to the stands very briefly, there will be far fewer, if any, Brits in attendance. I saw a couple of clips from the first 2 fights, and there was, a massive contingent coming over. So it's kind of like, and Wilder's not exactly a huge star in the US, right? He doesn't have a huge band of fans, so it might be quite an interesting atmosphere, maybe quite even subdued.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. It's a different kind of atmosphere sometimes in Vegas for big fights. When it's not a British fighter, they kind of go to a fight to be entertained, whereas British fight fans go there, they have a few beers, they get the whole place going, whereas the American fans will get into it, but it has to be exciting. I mean, this is probably going to be exciting, but the other side of it is Fury has built a bit of a fan base over here, that there will be people just rooting for him, because Wilder, as you said, hasn't got a huge following. So I don't think it'll be 50-50. I think it'll be pro Wilder, but I think there will be a few Fury fans in there. But it may be subdued, but once the punches start going, I think it'll start rocking in there.
So in a few hours' time, Jimmy Lennon Jr.'s done his thing. The referee's given his final instructions. 3 men left in the ring. What happens when that bell rings? What are the first few minutes like?
They charge to the centre of the ring and collide. And I wonder if these sort of disruptions over the final few weeks for Fury mean he's taken his eye off to a degree and gets caught really than he ought to. So I have a feeling he might make the earlier rounds harder for himself than they need to be. So I think it will be exciting, but I can't look past Fury being too much for him.
Yeah, I mean, I've changed my mind after the weigh-in. Before the weigh-in, as I said, I I think Fury's going to go long with Fury points, but I think those early rounds now, they're going to be just standing and trading. And the thing Fury needs to, if he's on his chest, that's good for Fury, because Wilder can't get the full extended right hand, so Wilder needs to find space, and if he can't do that, and that was a big problem in the second fight, he couldn't really find the space. His feet weren't quick enough to get away as Fury came at him, so I think they'll end up trading, and I think that's going to, in a way, even though the bigger puncher, you wouldn't usually say that, it should favour Wilder if they're just trading. But if Fury's on his chest, I think he'll be happy there, because he's within that range and he can go to work, and he's a better inside fighter.
Any chance Fury has to get up off the canvas again to do it? I mean, of course there's a chance. Anything can happen, but you know, if he does have that slower start, maybe.
But that's the thing, when he's rushing in, he can get caught. Possibly it could be like that, but I still think that he will get the better of him in those exchanges.
Well, let's hope for the sake of British boxing that Tyson Fury does indeed have his arm raised. Full house for the stoppage here. Do join us throughout the weekend on Mirror Fighting. The fight itself, BT Sport box office, probably around 5 AM in the UK. You can follow all the action with us as well.